Nobody cares. Focus on yourself. Let me ask you something honestly. How much of your life have you spent worrying about what other people think of you? How many decisions have you second-guessed because you were afraid of judgment? How many times have you held yourself back, dimmed your light, shrunk your dreams, killed your ambitions? Not because you couldn't do the thing, but because you were terrified of what someone else might say. How many nights have you replayed a conversation in your head, rewriting what you said, what you should have said, how you could have come across better, smarter, more confident, more impressive? How many years have you handed over to the silent jury in your mind? That imaginary audience that you've been performing for your entire life? I need you to sit with that question for a second. Because here's the truth that nobody in your life ever sat you down and told you. The truth that is so obvious once you see it, so devastatingly clear once you really understand it, that you're going to feel equal parts relieved and furious at the same time. Nobody cares. Not the way you think they do. Not in the way that should be controlling your life. Not in the way that should be running your decisions, limiting your choices, shaping who you are and who you let yourself become. Nobody cares. And before you misunderstand me, before you think I'm telling you that your life doesn't matter, that people don't love you, that relationships aren't real, let me be very precise about what I mean. What I mean is this: the version of other people that lives in your head, that constantly watching, constantly judging, constantly evaluating, always keeping score, that version doesn't really exist. What I mean is, people are far too consumed with their own fears, their own insecurities, their own silent suffering, their own desperate need to be seen and validated, to be watching you the way you think they are. What I mean is, the audience you've been performing for isn't even paying attention. And once you genuinely understand that, not just intellectually, not just as a concept, but deeply in your bones, everything changes. Because once you stop performing for people who aren't watching, you get to start actually living. This is what this video is about. This isn't a motivational speech. This isn't a collection of cute quotes about self-love that feel good for 10 minutes and then evaporate. This is a serious, in-depth conversation about one of the most crippling and underestimated psychological traps that human beings fall into, and how to escape it permanently. We're going to talk about where this need for external validation comes from, why your brain evolved to care about what others think, why that was once useful, and why it is now catastrophically misaligned with the life you're trying to build. We're going to talk about what you're actually losing every single day that you spend living for other people's approval. We're going to talk about how to stop, and we're going to talk about what your life looks like on the other side of this shift, when you finally, genuinely start focusing on yourself. So stay with me. This one's going to go deep. And if this kind of content speaks to you, if you want more conversations like this, conversations that actually go beneath the surface and try to fundamentally change how you see yourself and your life, then subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the notification bell, because this is what we do here. We go deep. We go real. We don't do shallow. Let's get into it. Part 1. Why your brain cares what people think. To understand why you care so much about what other people think of you, you have to understand something about where you came from. Not where you grew up. Not your family, not your school. I mean where human beings as a species came from. Go back in your mind 50,000 years, 100,000 years, 200,000 years. You are a human being living on the African savanna. There are no cities. There are no institutions. There are no systems that will catch you if you fall. There is number 911 to call. There is no hospital. There is no food delivery app. There is your tribe, and that's it. Your tribe is a group of maybe 30 to 150 people. These are the people you hunt with, gather with, sleep near, raise children among. These people are not just your social support. They are your survival. Without them, you are dead. Alone on that savanna, without tools, without weapons you couldn't make yourself, without the collective knowledge of the group, you last maybe 2 weeks before a predator gets you or starvation does. In that environment. And understand, your brain was built in that environment. Social rejection was not an inconvenience. Social rejection was a death sentence. Being cast out from the group, being seen as deviant, being evaluated as not contributing, not fitting in, not following the social norms of the tribe, that meant exile. And exile meant death. So your brain evolved an extraordinarily sensitive early warning system. A system designed to constantly monitor your social standing. To constantly read the faces of the people around you for signs of disapproval, rejection, contempt. To feel pain, actual neurological pain, when you sense that others were judging you negatively. That system is still inside you. It's running right now. Neuroscientists have studied this. Brain imaging research has shown that social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. When you feel rejected, embarrassed, judged, your brain processes that the same way it processes being physically hurt. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. Social pain is real pain. And your brain treats threats to your social status with roughly the same urgency as threats to your physical safety. So when you care what people think, when you feel that spike of anxiety before posting something online, when you replay an awkward conversation at 2 a.m., when you feel that crush of embarrassment after saying something stupid in a meeting, that is a 200,000-year-old survival mechanism firing in a world that no longer requires it. That's not weakness. That's not pathetic. That's biology. That's evolution. That's the machine that kept your ancestors alive, doing exactly what it was designed to do. But here is the problem. That machine was calibrated for a world that no longer exists. In the world that calibrated your brain, there were maybe 100 people whose opinion actually mattered to your survival. And you saw those people every single day. You knew them intimately. Their judgment of you had direct, immediate, tangible consequences. In your world, the world you actually live in today, you are exposed to thousands, tens of thousands, potentially millions of people's opinions and judgments every single day.
Online, in media,
at work, in social settings. Your anxiety system was never designed to process that volume. It was never designed to evaluate the opinion of a stranger on the internet who left a cruel comment and then went back to their own life, never thinking about you again. But your brain doesn't know that. Your brain treats that anonymous comment the same way it would have treated your chief of tribe looking at you with contempt. Your brain treats the fear of posting your work online the same way it would have treated the fear of being judged as incompetent and potentially excluded from the group. Your brain is running ancient software on a modern world. And the mismatch is slowly destroying you. This is the first thing you need to understand. Caring what people think is not a character flaw. It's a hardware issue. You came with this installed. Every human being on Earth has this installed. The people you most admire for their confidence, their independence, their apparent freedom from others' opinions, they have this too. They haven't gotten rid of it. They've learned to understand it, to manage it, to not let it run their lives. That's the skill. That's what we're developing here. But before we can develop that skill, we need to go deeper, because the biology is only part of the story. The other part is what happened to you personally. What was done to you, consciously and unconsciously, by the people and systems that raised you. Part 2. How you were trained to need approval. You were not born caring this much about what others think. Yes, the neurological hardware was there. Yes, the capacity for social pain was present. But the intensity of it, the specific ways your approval-seeking manifests, the particular people or situations that trigger it most strongly, the exact shape of your specific anxiety, that was learned. That was taught to you. Slowly, systematically, without anyone necessarily meaning to. Think about childhood. Think about what children are rewarded for and punished for from the very first moments they can understand consequences. Be good. That means behave in ways that make the adults around you comfortable. Get praise. Get smiles. Get that warm, secure feeling of approval. Be bad. That means behave in ways that make the adults around you uncomfortable. Get disapproval. Get cold shoulders. Get the withdrawal of love and warmth. Get that terrifying, destabilizing feeling that maybe you are not enough, maybe you are too much, maybe something is wrong with you. Children are exquisitely sensitive to emotional tone. They cannot always articulate it. They may not even consciously register it, but they feel it. They absorb it. And their developing brains draw conclusions from it. Conclusion: my value, my safety, my lovability are conditional. They depend on how I behave. They depend on whether the people around me approve of me. Now, This is not some dark conspiracy by parents. Most parents are doing the best they can with what they have. Most of this happens completely unconsciously. Parents are just transmitting the same conditioning that was transmitted to them. But understand what happens inside a child who grows up believing that love is conditional, that approval must be earned, that safety comes from meeting other people's standards. That child grows up. But the belief doesn't leave with childhood. That belief becomes the operating system. That belief runs in the background of every decision, every relationship, every moment of self-evaluation. And then you add on top of childhood conditioning the broader cultural conditioning. You're taught at school to compete for grades, external validation from teachers and institutions. You're taught to compare yourself to your peers. You're taught that there is a right way to be smart, a right way to succeed, a right set of achievements that determines whether you're valuable. Then you enter adolescence. And if childhood is approval-seeking training ground, adolescence is the advanced course. The social dynamics of teenage years are brutal, all-consuming, identity-defining. The peer group becomes everything. Fitting in becomes a survival strategy. Being different, being weird, being outside the accepted norms of your social group is experienced as catastrophic. Most people never fully recover from high school. Not because high school was particularly traumatic, though for many it was, but because the neural pathways that were formed during those years, the habits of self-monitoring, self-censoring, performing for others, those pathways got stronger and stronger with use, and they persisted into adulthood. Then comes social media, which is essentially a technology built to systematically exploit and amplify every one of these tendencies. A platform that quantifies social approval, that reduces your value as a person to numbers. Likes, comments, followers, views. That shows you a curated feed of everyone's highlight reel so you can compare your behind the scenes to their best moments. That is specifically designed by teams of engineers and psychologists to trigger your approval-seeking circuitry as often as possible, because your anxiety is profitable. And then you wonder why you can't stop caring what people think. Look at what you've been through. Look at the layers. Evolutionary hardware wired for social sensitivity. A childhood that taught you love is conditional. An education system that rewarded conformity and comparison. An adolescence that punished difference. A social media ecosystem engineered to keep you in a constant state of approval seeking. Of course you care what people think. You were practically built to. But here's what's different now. Here's what changes. You are no longer a child. You are no longer dependent on anyone else's approval for your survival. You are no longer in high school. You are no longer helpless inside systems that trained you. You are an adult. And adults get to examine their conditioning. They get to question it. They get to decide consciously whether to continue operating from it, or to replace it with something more true, more useful, more aligned with the life they actually want. That process starts with understanding the cost of what you've been doing. Part 3. The price you're paying. Let's talk about what approval-seeking actually costs you. Not in vague, abstract terms. In specific, concrete, brutal terms. Because I think a lot of people know intellectually that they care too much about what others think. They've heard it before. They nodded along. And then they kept doing it anyway. The reason people don't change isn't usually lack of understanding. It's lack of emotional urgency. They haven't fully confronted what this pattern is actually taking from them. So let's confront it. The first cost is time. Every moment you spend wondering what someone thinks of you, that's time not spent on your own goals. Every hour you spend adjusting your behavior to manage someone else's impression of you, that's an hour not spent building what you actually want to build. Think about the hours you've spent in the last year alone replaying conversations, worrying about how you came across, checking your phone for validation, adjusting your social media presence to craft a more acceptable image of yourself. Add it up. Seriously. Try to add it up. Now imagine what you could have done with those hours if they had been spent actually working on the things you say you want. The book you want to write. The business you want to build. The skill you want to develop. The relationship you want to deepen. The health you want to create. The time cost of approval seeking is staggering. And it's invisible, which makes it worse. Nobody budgets for it. Nobody sees it going. It just bleeds away, in minutes and hours and days, and you wonder where your life went. The second cost is authenticity. When you live for other people's approval, you cannot be yourself. That's not a metaphor, it's a literal description of what you have to do. To maintain approval, you have to constantly monitor what others want from you, and then give it to them. You have to suppress the parts of yourself that might be rejected. You have to emphasize the parts of yourself that get rewarded. You have to perform. And the longer you perform, the more you lose touch with who you actually are beneath the performance. I'm not being dramatic. This is one of the most common things that people report when they do deep psychological work. They realize that they don't actually know what they want. They don't know what they genuinely believe. They don't know who they are apart from the version of themselves that they've been performing for others. Think about your own life. How much of your life is authentically yours, your own choices, your own values, your own direction, versus how much is a performance? How much is you doing what you thought you were supposed to do, being who you thought you were supposed to be, choosing the path that would generate the most approval from the people around you? What would you do differently if you knew, truly, deeply, completely, that nobody was watching and nobody cared? That question is not rhetorical. I genuinely want you to sit with it, because the gap between your answer to that question and your actual life, that gap is the cost of approval seeking. That gap is your unlived life. The third cost is your relationships. Here's a painful irony. The more you need other people's approval, the worse your relationships become. Think about why. When you need someone's approval, you can't be honest with them. You tell them what they want to hear. You avoid conflict. You suppress your genuine feelings and opinions to maintain their positive perception of you. You become a shapeshifter, adjusting yourself to whoever you're with. But here's the thing about human beings. We can sense inauthenticity. We might not be able to articulate it. We might not consciously identify it, but we feel it. We feel when someone is performing for us versus actually being real with us. And we don't trust performances. We can't be intimate with them. So the approval seeker, desperately trying to be liked by everyone, ends up being genuinely close to no one. Because genuine closeness requires genuine honesty. And genuine honesty requires the willingness to risk disapproval. The people who are most deeply loved are not the people who tried hardest to be liked. They're the people who were most willing to be themselves, even when themselves was difficult, or weird, or not what others expected. Being yourself is actually the foundation of deep connection. But you can't be yourself when you're running an approval-seeking operating system. The fourth cost is your potential. This one is perhaps the most devastating. Every great thing that has ever been done was done by someone who was willing to be judged for it. Every business that was built, every work of art that was created, every movement that was started, every innovation that changed the world, every act of courage that mattered. All of it required someone to step into the arena of being evaluated, being criticized, being misunderstood, being mocked, and do the thing anyway. The approval seeker cannot do this. They are paralyzed at the threshold. They can dream about the arena from the outside. They can watch other people step in. They can imagine how it would feel. But they cannot cross the threshold, because crossing it requires accepting the possibility of disapproval. And they have made that possibility unacceptable. So they stay safe. They stay small. They stay in the lane that feels approved. And their potential, the enormous, extraordinary potential that every human being carries, stays locked inside them, unexpressed, unrealized, taken with them when they die. I want you to feel the weight of that. I want you to feel it not as a lecture, but as a personal thing. What have you not done because you were afraid of what people would think? What have you not said? What have you not started? What have you not tried? What version of yourself have you kept locked away because you weren't sure if it would be approved of? Because here is the truth that nobody tells you. The world doesn't need the version of you that's been optimized for approval. The world needs the real you, the actual you, the fully expressed, sometimes difficult, sometimes weird, completely original you. That version of you has something to offer that literally nobody else on earth can offer. But you've been hiding them to fit in. And the cost of that is not just yours to bear, because the gifts you carry aren't only for you. Part 4. The Spotlight Effect and the Truth About Attention. Now I want to give you a specific piece of psychological research that I think has the power to physically loosen the grip of what we've been talking about. It's called the spotlight effect. Here's how it was discovered. Researchers at Cornell University, Thomas Gilovich and colleagues, ran a now-famous series of experiments. In one of them, they asked participants to put on an embarrassing t-shirt, specifically one with a big picture of Barry Manilow on the front, and then walk into a room full of other students. Afterward, the researchers asked the t-shirt wearer how many people in the room they thought had noticed the shirt. And they asked the people in the room whether they'd noticed. The t-shirt wearers consistently guessed that about half the people in the room had noticed their embarrassing shirt. The actual number? About 25%. Less than half of what people assumed. This pattern has been replicated across dozens of experiments. People dramatically and consistently overestimate how much others notice them. Their appearance, their behaviors, their mistakes, their awkward moments. Why? Because when you make an error or do something embarrassing, you are completely aware of it. It's vivid to you. It feels enormous to you. But to everyone else in the room, it's one tiny data point in the midst of their own busy inner lives. They have their own insecurities to worry about, their own fears to manage, their own stories running in their heads. Your embarrassing moment barely registers, and if it does register, it fades from their memory within hours while you replay it for weeks. Think about that. The thing you spent 3 weeks cringing about after that awkward work presentation? Most of the people in that room forgot about it by lunch. The thing you said at the party that you've replayed 100 times and are still embarrassed about? The people you said it to barely remembered it by the time they got home. The business idea you didn't share because you were afraid people would think it was stupid? Most of them would have forgotten you mentioned it within days and moved on to thinking about their own lives. The spotlight that you feel pointed at you, brilliant, intense, exposing every flaw, is largely a creation of your own mind. Other people are not watching you with anything like the intensity that you imagine. They're too busy being watched themselves, or rather, being too busy imagining that they're being watched. Everyone is standing in the spotlight of their own self-consciousness, convinced that the audience is paying attention to them. And because everyone is doing this simultaneously, almost nobody is actually watching anyone else. This is not a reason to feel unseen. It's a reason to feel free. The pressure you've been living under, the constant performance, the constant self-monitoring, is largely self-imposed. The jury you've been living in fear of isn't even in session. They went home. They're worrying about their own stuff. Now, I want to be careful here because I don't want to take this too far. People do notice things. Relationships do matter. Social reputation does have real consequences in some contexts. I'm not saying other people don't exist or that their perceptions of you are irrelevant. What I'm saying is that the magnitude of others' attention that you are imagining is a significant distortion of reality. And making life decisions based on an imagined spotlight that is 3 times larger than the real one is a recipe for a very small, very constrained, very disappointing life. The antidote to the spotlight effect is not to stop caring entirely about how you show up. The antidote is to recalibrate, to get a more accurate picture of how much attention you're actually receiving, to bring your internal experience in line with external reality. And when you do that, when you realize that the spotlight is much smaller and much less powerful than you thought, it becomes a lot easier to step into it. Part 5. The difference between performance and presence. I want to draw a distinction that I think is one of the most important things you can understand about human psychology. It's the distinction between performance and presence. Performance is when you are managing how you appear to others. Presence is when you are fully inhabiting your own experience. Performance is strategic, calculated, outward directed. You are always watching yourself from the outside, wondering how you're coming across, adjusting in real time to the feedback of others.
Présence is direct.
Unself-conscious, inward directed. You are engaged with what is actually happening, what you think, what you feel, what you want to do, rather than with how that looks. Here's something fascinating. The people who seem most magnetic, most charismatic, most genuinely compelling to be around, they are almost never performing. They are present. Think about the best conversations you've ever had. The ones where time disappeared. The ones that felt real and alive and like you were actually connecting with another human being. Were those conversations happening because someone was brilliantly managing their image? Were they the result of someone carefully calculating exactly what to say to be perceived as intelligent and interesting? No. Those conversations happened when someone stopped performing and started being present. When they forgot to worry about how they were coming across and actually showed up, curious, honest, engaged, real. That quality, presence, is magnetic. It's rare. And it is completely incompatible with the approval-seeking performance mode. You cannot be present while you are performing. They are mutually exclusive. Every ounce of energy that goes into managing your image is an ounce that is not going into actually being there. Actually listening. Actually thinking. Actually feeling. Actually connecting. This is why approval seekers, despite their desperate desire to be liked, so often end up feeling isolated. Despite all the effort they put into being what others want, they feel unseen. Because they are unseen, not by others, but by themselves. They've disappeared behind their own performance. The path back to yourself, and paradoxically, the path to being more genuinely liked and connected, is not to get better at performing. It's to stop performing, to practice presence instead. What does that look like in practice? It means entering conversations without an agenda about how you need to come across. It means sharing your genuine opinion even when it might not be the popular one. It means allowing yourself to be bad at things, to not know things, to be uncertain and vulnerable and human. It means staying with your own direct experience. This thought, this feeling, this moment, rather than constantly jumping outside yourself to watch yourself from others' eyes. It means trusting that who you actually are, without editing, without optimizing, without performance, is enough, is more than enough, is actually the most interesting and valuable version of you there is. This is not easy. If you've been performing for decades, presence can feel frightening, dangerously exposed, like walking out on stage without a script. But that discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that you're actually showing up. And showing up really fully without the armor of performance is the bravest thing you can do. Part 6. The opinions of others. A reality check. Let's do a reality check on the opinions of others. Because one of the reasons we give so much power to other people's judgments is that we treat them as if they're reliable, objective, informed assessments of our worth. As if the fact that someone disapproves of us means something definitive and true. Let me dismantle that. First, most people's opinions of you are formed almost instantaneously, based on almost no real information about who you actually are. Research on first impressions shows that people form judgments about others within the first few seconds of meeting them. These snap judgments are based on superficial information: how you look, how you're dressed, how you move, whether you remind them of someone they already know. These first impressions are often wildly wrong, and they are almost completely unrelated to your actual character, your actual capabilities, your actual value. The person who judged you as incompetent in that meeting, they made that judgment in 90 seconds, based on one nervous presentation, without knowing anything about your years of work, your real capabilities, your actual intelligence. Their opinion is based on essentially nothing. Second, people's opinions of you are primarily projections of their own psychology. When someone criticizes you harshly, what they're usually expressing is something about themselves, their own frustrations, their own insecurities, their own unmet expectations, their own wounds and biases and history. The critical person who told you your work wasn't good enough, are they a reliable authority on quality? Or are they someone with perfectionist tendencies who applies that same brutal standard to everything, including themselves? Are they someone threatened by your potential? Are they someone who was told their own work was never good enough and has simply passed that down? Think about the people in your life whose opinions you've given the most weight to. Think about who they are. Think about their own psychology. Think about whether, if you were evaluating a stranger who said the same things to someone else, you would actually trust that voice as an authority. Third, the people judging you most harshly are usually the ones doing the least. This is almost a universal truth. The loudest critics, the most certain judges, the most enthusiastic evaluators of others' worth and choices These are almost never the people who have themselves done the difficult, vulnerable work of creating something, building something, putting themselves out there. Theodore Roosevelt captured this perfectly in his famous speech in 1910. The man in the arena, the one actually fighting, sweating, failing, trying, that man is not in the stands criticizing. He's too busy. He has too much humility. He knows too well how hard it is. The ones in the stands, comfortable and safe and dry, offering their opinions on whether you're doing it right, they have no skin in the game. Their opinions are formed in the absence of the knowledge that only comes from actually doing the thing. Why are you giving those opinions power over your life? Fourth, the person whose opinion you most fear disapproval from is often thinking about you far less than you think. Remember the spotlight effect. Remember that everyone is living inside their own spotlight of self-consciousness. The person you're most terrified of disappointing, your parent, your boss, that person from school you still think about, they are not maintaining a running scorecard of your choices and failures. They have their own life to manage, their own fears to navigate, their own pile of insecurities they go to sleep with every night. The power you've given their imagined judgment is not proportional to how much they're actually thinking about you. And fifth, perhaps most importantly, even if someone does judge you, and even if their judgment is negative, and even if it persists, what actually happens? Think about the worst-case scenario. The thing that your approval-seeking brain treats as catastrophic. Someone thinks badly of you. They say something negative. They disapprove. And then what? Usually, not always, but usually, the answer is not much. Life continues. You still have your capabilities, your relationships, your opportunities. The judgment passes. The person moves on. The world does not end. We treat the possibility of disapproval as if it's a physical threat. Our brains treat it that way because of the evolutionary history I described earlier. But in the modern world, in most situations, it isn't. The cost of being judged is usually far, far lower than the cost of a life constrained by the fear of judgment. Part 7. What focus on yourself actually means. Okay, so we've established the problem. We've established the cost. We've started dismantling some of the thinking that keeps you trapped. Now let's talk about what the alternative actually looks like. Because focus on yourself is advice that sounds simple but is often deeply misunderstood. Some people hear focus on yourself and think it means be selfish, ignore others, don't care about anyone, become an island. That's not what I mean. That's not what the deepest traditions of self-work have ever meant. That path doesn't lead to fulfillment. It leads to a different kind of emptiness. Some people hear focus on yourself and think it means be arrogant. Think you're better than everyone. Dismiss other perspectives. Also not what I mean. Arrogance is not confidence. Arrogance is actually a form of insecurity. It's approval-seeking turned inside out, still defined entirely in relation to others. What focus on yourself actually means is this. Make your own inner life your primary reference point. Instead of constantly looking outward, checking what others are thinking, adjusting to others' expectations, using others' opinions as your measure of your worth, you turn inward. You make your own values, your own assessment, your own sense of what is right and good and true, the primary compass you navigate by. This is what mature, psychologically healthy adults do. They are not indifferent to others. They are not selfish. They are not arrogant. But they have a stable, internalized sense of self that doesn't collapse or inflate based on what other people say about them. Psychologists call this having an internal locus of control. The center of gravity is inside you rather than outside you. You are self-directed rather than other-directed. Let me break this down into what it looks like in practice. It means knowing your values and living from them. Not the values you were taught to perform. Not the values that get approval. Your actual values. The things you genuinely believe, deep down, are important and right and worth orienting your life around. Do you actually know what those are? Have you ever sat down and thought seriously, not what you're supposed to value, but what you actually do? What makes you feel that your time was well spent? What makes you feel genuinely proud, not in a performed way, but in a quiet, internal way? What would you stand behind even if nobody was watching? Those are your values. Living from them, Consistently, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's unpopular. That is what it means.